Well, there you all are, and welcome in to Six Screen Sunday. Wow, I'll tell you, on Sunday, we do something different here on the Six Screens. We talk about Scripture, we talk about Christianity. We at times reference the Watchtower and what their false teachings are and what true teachings are according to the Bible. So we're glad you can join us today. Now, we have a program here right now. It's called the COCHISE Pendleton Hour. Now, Cochise Pendleton, he wrote a book, and I first became acquainted with Cochise about 12, 15 years ago. And he wrote a book called The Bible versus the Watchtower. And we're so glad that he's on our program. And he's going to be kind of suggesting to us as Christians, how do we accept all of the things we're hearing in the news? It's kind of difficult sometimes to digest it all. And even us Christians sometimes are not understanding what's going to happen in the future. But we have Cochise. He's going to come on today. He's going to help us Christians kind of fit into the world we're in. Not that we have to become dinosaurs, but he's going to help us fit into the social networking that we're now in this culture that's brand new. This is a whole brand new culture. So hello, Cochise.
Well, hello, Rick, and hello, audience, and thank you for sticking around. I promise you this program today will not disappoint those who give me their time. And as I've always said, time is the most valuable thing that I possess. You can never get it back. So I've spent many hours preparing for this program, and one that is fascinating. So I wanted to say thank you for coming. I hope you can hear me fine. I actually decided to wear a jacket and a white shirt. Kind of reminds me of the Kingdom Hall. Maybe I'll go back and take in a meeting or something. Obviously, I'm kidding. In case if you don't know my kind of humor, it's somewhat dry. But anyway, that said, thank you for coming. The topic of UFOs is voluminous. There's so much information out there in the ether, and so every day I'd have something else I want to jot down and talk about. And I only have an hour, and you could talk about this subject for 24 hours. So I've tried to condense the program into a short period of time, so as to make it hopefully interesting. It definitely was interesting to me. There's a caveat at the end of the program that you'll definitely want to hear. But if you feel I'm wasting your time, I always say this: just turn me off. Don't waste your time. But I promise you, today will not be one of those days. As I was writing down more information, there's a lot of information on TikTok, the Chinese app that people say you shouldn't use. I don't use it, but people send me information and I look at it. But there was some information there by a Dr. Stephen Greer, and we've all heard about Area 51. And that really is an old, archaic area that held the UFOs, or the UAPs as they call them today, the unidentified aerial phenomena. And he said, as a matter of fact, he was on TikTok, he said that there's a new state-of-the-art place in Utah at the Army base, the Dugway Proving Ground. They call it the DPG, Dugway Proving Ground, and that's the Army base, and that's in Utah. And this particular state-of-the-art facility that took the Area 51 place away, according to Dr. Greer, is 1,300 square miles under the earth. And they have all kinds of goodies there. So that's apparently the new place that took the place of Area 51. So that's what he is saying. And so I'm just regurgitating what he has already said. And he's all over TikTok. He's all over everywhere. So I was, putting this program together, I didn't really know where to start. Where do you start? And because there's so much information. So where do you start? Well, I want to start everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. And I put a little outline together to kind of keep my direction focused, so I don't go off on a tangent. And for the Christians out there, please pay attention, because the UFOs, the UAPs, what consequence, if any, does it have on the Christian church, upon our faith? And that's a question that we need an answer to. And I'm hoping that this program will give us that answer. And as I always say, opinions are like noses. Everyone has one. So the material that I'm going to discuss isn't my opinion. It's not Cochise Pendleton's opinion, because my opinion is not relevant to this topic. What is relevant are the opinions or the facts that surround the UFO government cover-up. And that's exactly what it is. That said, let me say this. The radar has never recorded the actual entering of UFOs or UAPs into our atmosphere. Now, that's pretty profound all by itself. So the United States radar has never recorded a UAP or a UFO entering the airspace of the United States. And I thought that was fascinating. Anyway, moving along. And this information, as a matter of fact, for those who know Dr. Walter Martin, who's now in heaven, he on YouTube, he lectured on this topic, and I took a lot of this information from that lecture, as well as other information. And I trust Dr. Walter Martin. He was the head of the Christian Research Institute. And so I extrapolated lots of information from that hour piece of footage and tried to write things down so I could deliver it to you. But you can watch that all by yourself on YouTube. Just type in Dr. Walter Martin on UFOs. It comes right up. But let me say this. The first major sighting of UFOs, it followed within 3 of the first atomic weapons during World War II. Apparently, UFOs became very interested in the radiation coming from our planet. So the question really is, what is a UFO? Are they real? Is this just pure fantasy? Are they friend? Are they foe? We don't know. But we're going to find out in the next few minutes of this program. Again, the conclusions you may not agree with, but they're, and again, I'm going to give you the conclusions that I've come up with and others have as well. And you can have your own conclusion and your own, you're intelligent, you figure it out. I'm just presenting the material. The first thing that I wanted to do is, that the government has always said there aren't any UFOs. People are having hallucinations. It's marsh gas. It's balloons. They're birds. It's natural phenomena. But it's not a UFO. It's not a ship. It's not a UAP. And we know that's not true. And I'm telling you for the record that that is categorically false. There are UFOs. There are UAPs. History proves this, and it is factual. There's a book, by the way, that I want you to get, which I'll mention a little bit later. A book that Dr. Walter Martin discussed in his lecture, of which I purchased and read, and the information is unimpeachable, fascinating. So matter of fact, since I'm talking about it right now, it's called Encounters with UFOs by John Weldon and Zola Levitt. And this goes back to the 70s. This was published in 1975. But in the book, I think you're going to find this let me get in front of this microphone here and put the light up here so I can see what I'm reading. But I wanted to read this first. Like I said before, where do I start? Where do I begin? Well, let me read you a little story that's in this book. And this book is it's just riddled with information. The plethora of information is profound, and it's unimpeachable. It reads like this: Betty Hill's Stars, STARS. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were allegedly taken aboard a UFO. Betty hit it off with the new captain, and he showed her a star map of trade routes and exploration paths involving a certain grouping of stars. And by the way, all this information is documented, and I'll be writing a blog on it, documenting all the information. And those who've signed up for my blog at the BibleVerses@thewatchtower.com, just scroll down and put your email in there and hit subscribe, and you'll get my blogs every time that I publish them. It says Betty and Barney were released unharmed, but they both began to experience nightmares. This condition continued for some 3 years until they consulted Boston psychiatrist and neurologist Dr. Benjamin Simon. Dr. Simon undertook time regression hypnosis in order to have the Hills relieve their unsettling abduction. Under post-hypnotic suggestion, Betty was able to reproduce the star map she allegedly was shown on the spacecraft. This was in 1964. No one knew what to make of the map with its 27 stars because a certain pattern of 3 of the stars was unknown at that time, and the other 24 were difficult to place in the universe with known materials. It was easily assumed that Mrs. Hill simply had a vivid imagination. Then they started finding the stars. In 1969, after 5 years of work, MUFON, that's MUFON, field investigator and research specialist Marjorie Fish found 9 of the main stars, correlating them to a known pattern in the constellation Reticulatum. By 1972, just the 3 mystery stars. By 1972, just the 3 mysterious stars were missing. Finally, they too were discovered as a triangle of background stars. Without the updated Jalise catalog of nearby stars released late 1969, these final 3 stars could never have been found. It was concluded that no astronomer could have drawn so accurate a star map as Betty Hill's in 1964. Miss Fish says that, quote, only contact with extraterrestrials, unquote, could have produced that map. The rather conservative Aerial Phenomena Research Organization calls Mrs. Fish's monumental task of identifying the star pattern, quote, one of the most important accomplishments, unquote, in UF research. So it wasn't a hoax. She had an experience, and it was proven. And it goes on to say, what are we to make of the case? If Betty Hill had a hallucination and saw a UFO and its crew, she would be just another contactee with another tale of extraterrestrials. But this housewife mapped stars no astronomer had found. Where did she get that information? Or better, who gave it to her? Betty Hill's map is something else again. It exists. It's quite correct. And it's just impossible that Betty Hill or anybody else on this earth could have produced it in 1964. Why are they tipping their hand like that, referring to the extraterrestrials? Why are they revealing that they really are supernatural creatures? What's in it for them? I wanted to read that because I found that this book is just riddled with information like this. Everything's documented. So, and proven. This lady could not have known about these stars. She wasn't an astronomer. They didn't even know back then where these stars were. How would she know if she wasn't told by someone who did know? And in this case, these extraterrestrials told her, gave her a ride on their shuttle or their ship. And through hypnosis, it was brought out. She was able to bring out the doctor what she experienced. And truly unbelievable. But then when the stars started to appear, that's called empirical data, scientific data, proven data, documented data. The stars didn't lie. They were there. And she knew exactly where they were. You know, so I say again, are these friends? Is this a fantasy? Are they friends or are they foes? And these are questions that we must ask ourselves. Something else I wanted to say is that the Bible is silent on this issue. You won't find any mention of UFOs in Scripture. You know, the Ezekiel's wheel and a wheel. It wasn't a UFO. The Bible is silent. It doesn't talk about UFOs. And so the question is, what is the implication to the church? What is the implication to me or to you as we go about our daily lives? How should we feel about these things? Should they disturb us? Should we lose sleep over them? How should we live our lives? Dr. C.S. Lewis said something very interesting that I wanted to share with you. He had a pamphlet. It was called, Will We Find God in Outer Space? He says, quote, God is the God of the cosmos, the creator of all things. Whether we go any place in his creation, there we will find his identity, his power, and the knowledge of him as creator. We need not be afraid of outer space because God is the God of time and space, and no one needs to fear. He made everything. He made the world. He created all things. So keep that in mind. So today, we're going to go down the rabbit hole and see how far down it goes and what we're going to find there. I call it the unknown extraterrestrial conundrum. That's what I call this rabbit hole. Or in other words, a confusing and difficult problem or question. I will present material through unimpeachable sources, which will help us discover through a natural process, making sense, yes, from a human perspective, the implications while addressing these three words: fantasy, friend, or foe. I just mentioned the book that I was referring to, and I encourage you all to get one. It's very, very inexpensive. It's good to have in your library. Here's an interesting note. I'll keep my eye on the clock here. Here's an interesting piece of fact. The first known photograph of a UFO was taken in August 12th, 1883. It was taken by a Mexican astronomer, Hispanic astronomer. His name was Jose Bonilla. He reported, as he was looking at the sun through his telescopes, at this observatory, he observed the sun. He says about 150 UFOs just appeared. As he's gazing in the skies, all of a sudden, different shapes of UFOs appeared, about 150 of them. He said that they were cigar and single shaped. That was in 1883. July 19th, 1952, and I skip around because I don't want to get bogged down into the minutia of this material, because there's so much to talk about, and documentation is not something that's interesting. I just want to kind of give you the feel of what's being said in these articles. In July 19th, 1952, something very unexpected and unique happened. Now, I'm going to read the article, because it happened in Washington, D.C., over the most protected airspace on Earth, and it happened in 1952. And it was on the naval radar, and it was on the airplane radar, the Air Force radar, excuse me. And I'm going to read segments of it because it's very, very, very exciting. And it's something that I want to share with you. Here we go. It says, at 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19th, 1952, Edward Nugent, an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport, today it's called the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, spotted 7 objects on his radar. And by the way, this is all documented. So much for the government trying to hide this. Now it's out in the open. It's on the radar screen. The objects were located 15 miles or 24 kilometers southwest of the city. No known aircraft were in the area, and the objects were not following any established flight paths. Nugent's superior, Harry Barnes, a senior air traffic controller at the airport, watched the objects on Nugent's radar scope. He later wrote, "We knew immediately that a very strange situation existed. Their movements were completely radical compared to those of ordinary aircraft." Barnes had 2 controllers check Nugent's radar, to make sure it was okay. They found that it was working normally. Barnes then called National Airport's Radar Equipment Control Tower. The controllers there, Howard Coughlin and Joe Zacco, said that they also had unidentified blips on their radar screen and saw a hovering bright light in the sky which departed with incredible speed. Cochran said, Zacko, did you see that? What the hell was that? At this point, other objects appeared in all sectors of the radar scope. When they moved over to the White House and the United States Capitol, Barnes called Andrews Air Force Base, located 10 miles from the National Airport. Although Andrews reported that they had no unusual objects on their radar, an airman soon called the base's control tower to report the sightings of a strange object. Airman William Brady, who was in the tower, then saw an, quote, object which appeared to be like an orange ball of fire trailing a tail. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. As Brady tried to alert the other personnel in the tower, the strange object took off at unbelievable speeds. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just kind of giving you the gist. It's quite lengthy. At 3 a.m., shortly before two United States Air Force F-94s, the Starfire F-94 jet fighters from Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware arrived over Washington, all of the objects vanished from the radar National Airport. However, when the jets ran low on fuel and left, the objects returned, which convinced Barnes that, quote, the UFOs were monitoring radio traffic and behaving accordingly. The objects were last detected by radar at 5:30 a.m. Now let me move over here. So we get, I won't get too close to the screen here. We get UFOs appeared in the sky, and the F-94s were the fastest jets at that time. And they found out that the UFOs disappeared when the jets came. So they were monitoring the radar. It says here, meanwhile, Albert M. Chop, the press spokesman for Project Blue Book, that's the name of a program that the government used to investigate these things, Project Blue Book, arrived at National Airport and, due to security concerns, denied several reporters' requests to photograph the radar screen. So the government didn't want the publicity, because they've always said they don't exist. They're hallucinations. They're fireballs. They're whatever they are, but they don't exist. At 11:30 p.m., two U.S. Air Force F-94 Starfire jet fighters from Newcastle Air Force Base arrived over Washington. Captain John Mahugo, the flight leader, was vectored towards the radar blips, but saw nothing, despite repeated attempts. However, his wingman, Lieutenant William Patterson, remember Top Gun, the wingman? Again, just a little dry humor there. Did see four white glows and chased them. He told investigators that quote, I tried to make contact with the bogies below 1,000 feet, and that, quote, I was at my maximum speed, but I ceased chasing them because I saw no chance of overtaking them. According to Albert Chop, when ground control asked Patterson, quote, if he saw anything, Patterson replied, I see them now, and they're all around me. What should I do? And nobody answered, because we didn't know what to tell them. Let me see here. Did I highlight anything else? I didn't highlight anything else that was important I wanted to share, but I did want to say this. Now, the F-94 Starfighter were the fastest jet at that time in 1952. Now, to put things, their quickest speed was like 640 miles per hour. Now, to put things into perspective, the quickest was, remember the Concorde? That thing flew They say 1,500 miles an hour or over 1,300 miles an hour. It could get from New York to Paris in 2.5 hours. That was the quickest thing that we had. The radar clocked these objects that just appeared at 7,000 miles an hour. Some at, in other cases, 25,000 miles per hour. They're making right-hand turns going 5,000 miles an hour. But yet the government didn't want anyone in or take pictures of the radar, but it was written on. It was a write-up. Now that's fascinating. So are there UFOs, UAPs? Absolutely. The first photograph one was 1883. Well, let me continue. I don't want to say that the government lied. I'll just say that they didn't tell the truth. They were hiding something. The 1938 War of the Worlds by Orson Welles radio broadcast scared the living daylights out of the world. So perhaps the government didn't want the world or the United States to go into a panic. Okay, so I can see that. That makes sense. That's reasonable, a reasonable conclusion to make. In 1974, one more thing. This cat and mouse thing that happened in 1952 with the extraterrestrials, it went on for 6 hours. 6 hours. And these things just disappeared. And they just played with these F-94s like they were nothing. And yeah, they're real, brothers. They're real. They're here. They're real. What are they? That's the question. What are they? In 1974, the Defense Department apparently cooperated in the effort and in the substantial UFO files stored at Maximum Air Force Base were shown on screen. Now check this out. It was stated that the Air Force had recorded 12,618 individual sightings in those files. That's 1974. And among the people that saw these UFOs were soldiers, policemen, and one was even a former astronaut. Interesting. There's a series on Netflix. It's called Skinwalker Ranch. And I've watched this thing, and it's in Utah. And really bizarre things have happened. They've seen UAPs flying everywhere and disappear in the mountain and just reappear like there's some kind of a hole there or portal there, or they don't know. But anyway, if you get a chance, watch that series. It's still ongoing. And I've watched it from the inception with my wife. It's fascinating. So it's interesting that Dr. Greer says the new Area 51 is in Utah. And it's underground. It's about 1,300 square miles. And I think that's fascinating. And so that's just another proof that something is out there. The question is, what is it? Let's check the time. Yeah, the time is just slipping by. Let me see here. What can I share? By the way, Dr. Walter Martin, he's a professor of theology. He saw a UFO. He's never been abducted, but he saw one. And when his colleagues asked him he was going to pursue this venture because that's the kind of person he was. He pursued the JWs, the Mormons, the cults, and exposed them. So he wanted to do the same thing with UFOs. And his colleagues said, don't do it. They're going to look at you like a nut. Well, in his own way of humility, he said, okay, but he continued. And he saw one. He said it was about 800 feet above the ground. It was in New Jersey at the time. It just kind of he has the only colored picture taken from a 35 millimeter camera. It was a clear day, he said, in Jersey above a seminary. It was circular. The ship was circular. It was bluish gray in color. It was about, as well as they could tell, 50 to 75 feet across and about 50 feet thick. The seminary professors witnessed the event. In 1973, there was a Gallup poll, November 29th, 1973, and 15 million people have personally seen UFOs. That was 1973. 15 million people. So when the government says that they don't exist, well, I'll just say that they're not telling the truth. So the question is, where do they come from? Why are they here? Do they have a belief system? Do they have do they believe in something? Do they have a theology? Are their intentions benevolent? In other words, philanthropic. They care for people, love people, want to do good things, helping others. And why don't they just land? Just land and talk to us, and be civil. There was, it says throughout the years, people have seen UFOs. They are shaped as boxes, cigars, potatoes, arches, drums, donuts. One was 19 foot, had a 19-foot tail. One was as long as a football field. One was glowing. There are all kinds of descriptions of aliens. And all these people everywhere saw something. They all saw something. You can't dismiss all of it. They all saw something. And don't forget the first Betty's story about the stars. According to Mr. Weldon in this book, he says the sightings of UFOs go back to 45,000 BC. Observations, in the sky. For example, the Hindu literature culture, which predates the Christian era by thousands of years, reports celestial and aerial cars. Now, that's how they explained them at that time. They were celestial aerial cars, flying cars that just flew around. That's what they called them. And bright clouds in the sky. The Tibetan literature also mentions them. Roman historians of the 3rd and 4th century mentions sightings. The Egyptian era, also in 1600 BC, mentions sightings. They call them circles of fire, bright as the sun. This particular type of craft, which landed, leaving a circle, leaving a stench on the ground where it landed. To this day, no one knows what that stench was. In 1897, I'm going here, going back, I'm just popping around, going everywhere because there's so much to talk about. In 1897, there were 2,500 contacts from individuals. Up to 1954, approximately 10,000. Since then, it's risen in the millions. So we look at what's happening today and what's happened in the past. And there are so many sightings, billions of people have seen them. So they are here. But what are they? Well, the book goes into how these particular craft have killed people, have killed pilots in the air. So they're not benevolent. If you were, you wouldn't be doing things like that. They've abducted people, experimented on people. Well, if we were searching the stars and flying to other planets, we'd probably do the same thing. That's what Dr. Walter Martin mentions. We do the same thing. So that was interesting. But they cannot be denied. They're here. They're everywhere. And they're all over the world, by the way. Every country, they're in every country. And they're becoming more voluminous day by day. As a matter of fact, even Congress is talking about it. As a matter of fact, there's a clip here. I'm going to turn my sound up because I want you to hear it. This is in Congress, and I listened to the testimony, and here it goes here.
Do you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier? Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Do you believe we have crashed?
Well, there you have it. So Congress now is involved in wanting to find out more about these things. Whistleblowers are coming out of the intelligence agencies and exposing what's really going on. So they're here, brothers. They're here. So the question of them being a hoax, they're not. Why aren't they a hoax? Because millions of people have seen them. And in a closed system, that is fact. That's factual. So within a closed system, millions of people seeing the same things. That's fact. That's evidence. It's a natural phenomena, like birds and I don't know, things in the sky. No, you can't. You can't say that because there are too many people and pilots that have seen them. So, and they describe them different colors, rainbow in color, large spheres. Are they interplanetary? People visiting people from other solar systems. Well, that can't be true because we have telescopes that go out of space and we've never seen any such thing. Are they intergalactic? Dr. Walter Martin says this must remain an open possibility. Earth has another civilization. Are they living on planet Earth? Well, there's no proof that they are. So you have to cross that off the list. Is it a secret weapon? Well, if the Russians, by the way, UFOs are all over Russia. The scientists now admit that. They're everywhere. If the Russians had this secret weapon, we'd know about this secret weapon. If the United States had the weapon, we'd know about that too. But no one seems to have this secret weapon. So Mr. Weldon's conclusion on all of this, he says, perhaps they're ultra-dimensional beings. Now, I don't have too much time left, but what I wanted to say is this, remember the scripture in Exodus chapter 7, verses 7 through 8 through 13. Remember Moses took his staff in Egypt and he threw it down and this staff became a serpent. Remember that? That was the power of God. And then what did the sorcerers do? They threw their staffs down and not through the power of God, but through the power of sorcery and demonic sources, their staffs became serpents. So something that I never even thought about. I said, I never thought about this, but in Moses' day, the demons or the sorcerers, the occult could change matter. They could change atoms that were one thing now, and they change them to be flesh in another sense. So the staff, wood, became flesh, became a serpent. So the power of darkness has that power. I never thought about that. I never thought about that. And I bet you never thought about that either. So perhaps these extraterrestrials are of the occult. They can change form. They can bend the light. They can change magnetic fields. They appear at will. They travel at speeds that we can't even comprehend. So are they of the occult? Well, interesting that in this book, it talks about the occult. It talks about people that have talked to extraterrestrials. And there's a man, I'm going to quote him. He claims, he says, his name is Uri Geller. And Uri Geller's relationship with his space contacts, his UFOs, and George King's incredible extraterrestrial communications through the power of yoga. Now, his claims that the product of forces of another world who places him here to enable men to see that his forces are benevolent. Uri Geller is virtually one big magnetic field. Now, this is profound information. When he was tested at the Stanford Research Institute on a magnetometer, an instrument which measures the strength of magnetic fields, the results were deemed, quote, impossible. The strength of Geller's personal magnetic field reached the top of the instrument's scale, or 0.3 of a gauss. According to the Stanford Research Institute, Geller's strength, now listen to this, Geller's strength is, quote, a significant magnetic field comparable to that of the Earth's. Now, again, he claims that he was put here by these extraterrestrials. Why? To show the world that they are benevolent. They are good. Well, let's dig just a little bit deeper. We also found through the occult that, I'll just read my words, is what is truly revealing the fact that the theology of these beings is in direct conflict to Christianity. Their theology contradicts Scripture. Now check this out. Number one. Now this is in the book, and this is from people that talk to them, communicate with them, and what these extraterrestrials have told them. The extraterrestrials say the occupants of these ships talked about salvation. The Bible is not the only way. Christ is not the only way. God is not a personal being. The extraterrestrials say, do not fear death. Man evolves. They evolve from planet to planet through reincarnation. They do not believe in punishment. They do not believe in the resurrection. These statistical considerations against life in outer space, the characteristics of the UFO phenomena itself, the high occult correlation and strong parallel to demonic powers, as well as Christian eschatological thought, all mitigate against the extraterrestrial theory. Conversely, they all support a demonic theory. The Antichrist, he will be a political leader of great acumen, virtually a sorcerer. He is engaging and appealing. He captures the loyalty of what is left of the world after the rapture, and he becomes a kind of universe messiah. The world trusts him with its problems, and he certainly succeeds in pulling it out of its misery. He demonstrates supernatural powers. Perhaps I should talk about the Antichrist and the powers that he will possess. This last paragraph says the book that I've read, I've mentioned to you. The book is riddled with voluminous amounts of documented, unimpeachable information. The source material is extremely profound. I highly recommend buying this book. Let me read from this book, chapter 1, paragraph 1. The UFOs are real. Those unidentified flying objects are really up there. Millions of people the world over have seen them, including unusually reliable observers of all kinds, scientists, government leaders, the military, the clergy, and ordinary citizens everywhere are seeing them on a regular basis. So are they demonic forces? Well, I would say yes. If they can change a stick into a snake, they can change atoms. They can appear and disappear. They can perhaps make their ships look like they're here when they're not here. Or they are here and some aren't here. They have these projections, perhaps. They appear as little men or tall men or skinny men. They can create flesh. The demons have that power demonstrated in the book of Exodus. They have that power. They're not here to help mankind. The book is riddled with that information. They don't show themselves readily. So are they the instrument of the devil? Will they help the Antichrist? The fears that the Bible talks about, people will be in fear of not knowing what's really going on. It is my opinion, based on the evidence that I have read, and the documented, by the way, evidence that I have read, that yes, there's nothing else to explain what they are. So I would say yes, they're instruments of Satan himself. And the sorcery they use to fool us. And Christ said, don't be fooled. And if they could, they would even fool the church, the body of Christ. And remember, Christ, he's the same today, yesterday, and in the future. He went away to the Father to prepare a place for us, and he will come again. So I hope this information has been illuminating, and I encourage everyone to buy this book. It's very inexpensive. I think it's less than $10. You can get it on Amazon. Read it for yourself. In the meantime, I'll be doing a blog and putting this on my blog and writing up the different materials that I've seen, the documentation. But UFOs are real. They are here. There's no denying them. Even Congress is talking about them and trying to get to the bottom of it. And I'll be doing some investigation on this new Utah facility that took over for Area 51. So God bless everyone until the next 2 weeks. This is COCHISE Pendleton. Thank you for tuning in and staying with me. And God bless everyone. And Rick, I'm going to put this right back.
I wanted to say, Cochise, very good job. I know you put a lot of work into that, and thank you very much. Really, I learned quite a bit, and I like how you tied all of the secular news articles in, current event news articles, as well as going back 100 years ago. So obviously, the secular world is aware of UFOs, and then I'm glad how you tied in the Christian way of dealing with it as well, and demonic forces. Good job, Cochise. Looking forward to it. I'll give you a call tomorrow sometime and let you know what's going on and how you did. I tell you right now, though, I like I do like the thought of, and I'm glad people could hear it, that it's demonic activity. A lot of Christians are still trying to come up to speed with this, but I don't know. Being a Christian myself, it's what other explanations can there be? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
All righty. Well, there you go. There's our good friend Cochise. And we're going to be going to another program coming up here next. Now, don't you guys leave us. We have got a program. We want you to come in. Anne-Marie and I are doing a program right now coming up in just a couple of minutes. Tell your story. Tell your story of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And, it can take 10 minutes, maybe the most 15. But, we're going to open the lines up and have you folks be able to tell your story of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Or maybe you know a friend that had a real calamitous end of Jehovah's Witness religion and how they got out. Whatever you want to talk about, Anne-Marie and I will entertain your thoughts coming up next right here on the Six Greens Telenetwork. We want to thank all those for coming into Cochise program today. So let's end this right now and let's go to our